We'll start the meeting in a couple of minutes. Just bear with us. We'll start the meeting in a couple of minutes. Just give us a second. Thank you. Muy buenos días a todos ustedes. Vamos a iniciar la reunión en un par de minutos. Hay que esperar que la gente empiece a ingresar a la reunión. Good morning, everyone. We'll start the meeting in a couple of minutes. If you want, you can start signing in. Just type your name and your agency, the name of your agency, in the chat box. You can see the chat box on the lower end of your screen. If you hover to the lower end of your screen, just type your name and your agency name. Thank you. Muy buenos días. En unos minutos vamos a comenzar la reunión. Si gustan, pueden escribir su nombre y el nombre de su agencia en la caja de chat, en el chat box. Esta la pueden encontrar en la parte de abajo de su pantalla. Esta se encuentra en la parte de abajo de la pantalla. Nomás dale un clic ahí donde dice chat y escriban su nombre y el nombre de su agencia. Iniciamos en unos momentos. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Jose Marquez with Caltrans, and alongside Carlos Lopez with Sidur, I serve as co-manager for the 2021 California Baja California Border Master Plan update. It's a pleasure and honor to host you today in this technical working group meeting. I hope that you and your loved ones are safe during these troubled times. We appreciate your dedication to this effort. This is our first Zoom meeting. We hope that technology will work with us. We ask you to please be patient and pay close attention to the meeting instructions. Carlos, with our interpreter team, will go over some tips about translation for this meeting. Carlos.
Good morning. Buenos días. My name is Carlos, as has already been stated, and I will be your interpreter for this meeting. Mi nombre es Carlos y como ya se indicó, seré su intérprete el día de hoy. En cuanto termine este aviso, se va a habilitar la función de interpretación. Una vez habilitada, en la parte inferior de su pantalla, en los controles de Zoom, va a aparecer un icono que dice Interpretation, interpretación, que es un icono de un globo terráqueo. Seleccione el icono y de ahí seleccione el idioma español para escuchar toda la reunión en español. Once interpretation is enabled, which will be right after this message, an interpretation icon will appear as part of your Zoom controls at the bottom of your screen. The interpretation icon looks like a world, and once it is enabled, you will be able to click on that and select English as your language if you want to hear all of the presentations in English. Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you, Carlos. And Cheryl Mason will review some housekeeping rules. Cheryl?
Yeah, before we go over the housekeeping rules, good morning, everyone, by the way. Lovely to have you all here with us. We're really delighted to have so many of you RSVP and be in attendance with us. Before we go to the next slide, I just want to point out kind of a Zoom basics. And I feel like most of you are pretty comfortable with Zoom, but just so you know how we're going to be using it today is right next to that interpretation button on your computers there, you'll see the chat button and also the raise hand button. And many of you are already chatting and have introduced yourself, which is great, so you're familiar with that. But just so you know, those are the ways we're going to be communicating. If you do have a question, you can raise your hand and we have folks monitoring that and we can call on you and work through Jose for that. And then if you have a question or a comment, you can use the chat feature as well, and that's how we'll do the introduction as well. So let's go into the next slide and I'll just read some of the meeting rules for today. Again, if you do have a question or you'd like to speak, please click the raise hand and then the chair will call on you. First time around, we may have to unmute you ourselves, and then after that, you'll be able to mute and unmute yourself. So we do ask that you speak clearly so that the meeting interpreters can translate. That's going to be very important. Prior to making any comments or asking a question, if you could please state your name and organization, that will be helpful. And then again, after making your comment, please mute yourself just so we can, be mindful of any background noises while other folks are talking. And that's it for the meeting rules, Jose.
Thank you, Cheryl. To expedite our self-introductions, if you haven't done it, can you please write your name and agency? Next slide, please. And can you please write your name and agency in the chat box, starting with the Mexican agencies? Make sure that the message is sent to all panelists and attendees. So if you haven't write your name and your agency's name in the chat box, please do so. Next slide, please. Could the technical working group representative from the U.S. write your name and agency in the chat box now? Thank you. Next slide, please. We have a packed agenda for today. We just went over the welcome and introductions, and after this, Carlos Lopez from CIDUR will go over our meeting agreements from our May 26th meeting. We'll also go over our revised study meeting and schedule. That's a presentation from Cheryl Mason. But the bulk of the meeting is items 4, 5, 6, and 7. And items number 4, we'll go over a summary of the stakeholder outreach that we did during the summer. We're also going to go over some innovative water improvement strategies that we have been developing. And item 5 of today's meeting, we'll go over our cross-border travel demand from 2015 to 2040. And with the same topic, we're on data. We'll go over our peak period water wait times methodology that we have been developed. Finally, we're going to wrap up with item number 7 that talks about the different data elements for port of entry and transportation parts that we're going to be requesting from you. And we'll be wrapping up with our meeting agreements. Next slide, please. In the next item on our agenda, Carlos Lopez from CIDUR will review the draft summary of agreement from our technical working group meeting held on May 26, 2020. The meeting agreements are included in item number 2 in your agenda package. As a reminder, to expedite the approval process, we shall not be requesting an approval motion and a second motion from any technical working group member throughout the meeting today. With that, Carlos.
Muchísimas gracias, Carlos. Es un honor saludarte. Gracias a todos los presentes. Vamos a continuación a darle lectura a los acuerdos de mayo 26, 2020. Tenemos como primer acuerdo, pues, que se aprobaron en la reunión del Grupo Técnico de Trabajo del 27 de febrero del 2020. En esa reunión fueron aprobados también los acuerdos de esa reunión, y pues el Comité Asesor de Políticas, el PAC, del Border Master Plan ha recomendado aprobar el alcance y la comunicación con las partes interesadas. Eso es en la tarea número 3. También en el acuerdo 3 recomendó que el PAC apruebe los objetivos para las estrategias innovadoras de mejoramiento de fronteras. Esto es para la tarea 7, con la siguiente modificación. Se debe de definir el contexto ampliado para cada concepto y el objetivo en la información que se le está proporcionando al PAC. Número 4, cualquier representante del TWG que le hubiera gustado responder que no está de acuerdo que no está de acuerdo o está de acuerdo sobre algún objetivo durante el ejercicio de votación, se acordó enviar comentarios por correo electrónico a Caltrans, a SIDUR y al Service Bureau antes del 29 de mayo. También en el número 5 se recomendó que el PAC apruebe el enfoque para llevar a cabo las estrategias innovadoras de mejoramiento de fronteras, como lo dice la tarea 7, con la aclaración de que la priorización de proyectos sea una tarea dentro de la misma tarea 7. Como acuerdo 6, se aprobó el enfoque y el formato de perfil preliminar para evaluar las condiciones existentes del sistema de transporte multimodal fronterizo California-Baja California, contemplado en la tarea 5. El análisis completo se va a compartir a través del PAC. Acuerdo 7, se recomendó que el PAC apruebe los siguientes periodos de tiempo para categorizar los puertos de entrada y los proyectos de transporte que están relacionados en la tarea 6. El periodo al corto plazo se acordó que fuese del 2020 al 2024, al mediano plazo del 2025 al 2030 y a largo plazo del 2031 al 2040. Acuerdo 8. Caltrans, SIDUR y el Service Bureau acordaron desarrollar un enfoque para proyectos de infraestructura de transporte masivo de una manera que refleje prioridades. Este enfoque se va a presentar para la aprobación, se le va a presentar a aprobación del PAC. Número 9, se acordó enviar cualquier comentario adicional sobre cualquiera de los puntos de la agenda a Caltrans, a SIDUR y al Service Bureau el 29 de mayo. El número 10, se aprobaron los borradores de acuerdos leídos en la reunión del Grupo Técnico de Trabajo del 26 de mayo. Y estos serían los acuerdos, son 10 acuerdos y bueno, voy a preguntarle a José si pasamos a solicitar al Grupo Técnico de Trabajo aprobarlos se solicitó, al Grupo Técnico de Trabajo que se aprobaran en la reunión del 26 de mayo del 2020, como les comentaba, diciendo sí o no, estoy de acuerdo, o alguna propuesta nueva. Esto es, José.
Muchísimas gracias, Carlos. Thank you, Carlos. Are there any questions or observations for Carlos? And remember, if you have a question, just raise your hand. We cannot see you, but remember, for people that just join us, if you haven't used the Zoom platform, if you hover to the lower end of your screen, you'll see a couple of icons. If you have a question, you'll see a hand, and so you can just raise your hand, and I'll be calling on you by name in case you have any questions. Let's see. I don't see anybody with their hand raised. Okay, so nobody has any question for Carlos? If there are no comments on the meeting agreement, I'll be calling for a vote of the technical working group representatives to approve the technical working group May 26, 2020 meeting agreement. Please make sure to unmute yourself. Can we unmute everybody, or please unmute yourself? Everyone that agrees with the meeting agreement, please say yes or sí. I'm not hearing anybody.
Jose, let's just make sure they were unmuted. So if you can unmute yourself, if you're
I think, guys, that the host has to unmute them the first time.
I think it's happening now.
Okay.
Oh, okay. They're still working through the list.
Yeah, it's happening
Okay.
now.
Okay. So once you see the telephone icon, please unmute yourself, and I'll be calling for a vote on the meeting agreement. Thank you. It's just taking a little bit of time. I'm seeing like one by one being
Yeah.
unmuted. So just bear with us. Thank you.
Yeah, I can see people are starting to unmute. Jose.
Yes, por favor, USIBWC, yes. Okay. So just give us a second, and please unmute yourself. Go to the lower end of your screen and make sure you're unmuted. Okay. 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 So everyone that I'm going to call for the vote, everyone that agrees, please say yes or sí.
Yes.
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 Sí.
Yes.
Sí, de acuerdo.
Sí, de acuerdo.
Thank you. Everyone that opposes this motion, please say no. With that, the May 26, 2020 Technical Working Group meeting agreements are approved. Thank you. And please, and thank you, Carlos, please mute yourself again. Next slide, please. In the next item on our agenda, Cheryl Mason from Sendex Service Bureau will review the updated study schedule and meeting dates. Please pay close attention to our new calendar. This is item number 3 in your agenda package. Cheryl.
Hey, good morning. If we can go to the next slide. Okay, so what you're seeing here on the slide is a revised project schedule. The end date of our Border Master Plan remains the same. We are still striving to complete the project by February 2021. But there are a couple of dates that we've adjusted, start dates, or we've compressed the schedule on several of the tasks, and we want to review that with you today. Particularly, they're the tasks in that dark green color that you're seeing on the slideshow. We're having, let's just review those. So task 4 is the gathering and updating some Border Master Plan data. Today, we're going to have a couple of presentations on cross-border travel demand and border wait times. And if those data are accepted, then we'll be able to wrap up this task by the end of September. And we'll do some narrative write-up to accompany the existing conditions in our chapters for the final report. Task 5 is pretty much complete. We'll just be adding a little bit information to that. Task 6, and you'll see there's a task 6A and a task 6B. Those tasks are about a process to update and enhance the technology and the structure of our data portal that the technical working group is going to use to submit their port of entry and related transportation projects. It also includes developing a new Border Master Plan website that we can maintain and add information throughout the year, even after this project has been completed. Now, as you'll recall, these enhancements were contingent on receiving additional monies by Caltrans. The monies were received. We procured consultants to help us with this effort, but we're getting a little bit of a late start on it. So to make up for the late start, we are compressing the time to work on this task. And our consultant is going to treat it like a sprint, and they are going to have intense focus on the deliverables. The Service Bureau, Caltrans, and SEDURT are going to do the same. And we are going to need the help from the technical working group to make it all come together. We're going to talk about this a little bit more at the end of the meeting in task 7. We talk about some of the project information we're going to need. The other item you'll see there, let's see, task 7, we're right on schedule with that. That's the innovative strategies. We're going to talk a lot about that today, and we'll focus on that in the October meeting as well. The GIS story map is going to start a little bit later, because again, we can't really start on that map until we have all of the, or that mapping exercise until we have all of the project information in. So that'll be revealed at the final meeting with the Policy Advisory Committee in February. And then the rest of the tasks are still on schedule. We'll be working on things October, November, December, and then working on the final reports. So this shift in the schedule, though, results in a little bit of a change in our meeting schedule. So if we can go to the next slide, let's review that. So today, okay, we've got our meeting today. It's a technical working group meeting, and we've got a few key tasks that we're going to be concentrating on. We are still having an October 20th meeting. It is still a joint meeting, but what we'll be focusing on is a little bit different. We're going to focus on innovative strategies and getting that piece approved through the PAC. And then also going to have the second half of that meeting will be a focus with the technical working group and probably some other technical staff. And we'll do some training on how to use this new data portal for entering key project information. So the PAC will be a combined meeting. The first half of the meeting, we'll let the PAC go, and then we'll work directly with the technical working group. The December 8th meeting has been repurposed. This is a new meeting for the technical working group. It's one that it'll just be us working together on the draft project list. So we'll present the ranked projects, the port of entry projects, how we've grouped the transportation projects, and we'll talk through all of that with you. The new meeting is January 7th. That's also a meeting with the technical working group where we will present the draft report, and any other items that we haven't discussed with you already we'll focus on at that meeting with you. And the February 11th meeting has not changed. That'll still be a combined technical working group policy advisory committee meeting where we'll present the final report for approval. So just a little bit of a shift there. We'd really appreciate your help if you could put those meeting dates on your calendars. And then if there's any information you need to share with the policy advisory committee rep, if you would do that as well, we would really appreciate the assistance. And that's all I have for that, Jose.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Cheryl? And remember, to ask a question, please raise your hand. Okay, I don't see anybody that has a question. Okay. Well, thank you, Cheryl.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please. The next item on our agenda will be led by our consultant team. This item is divided in two parts. In the first part of their presentation, our consultant team will be reviewing the outcome of two surveys and two workshops that we conducted during this summer. These outreach activities gain insights on border transportation issues and help identify innovative border improvement strategies to better manage our binational transportation system. In the second consultant presentation, the IBI group will propose an approach to group these border improvement innovative strategies. This is item number 4 in your agenda package. At the end of the presentation, we would like to hear your feedback. Elizabeth.
Jose, thanks so much. Good morning, everyone. So glad to be with you again. There are over 70 people on the call, so thank you so much for joining us. And let's go to the next slide, please, Erica. We just want to we want to do a quick recap of all the activities that kind of led us to where we are today. Many of you on this call were took place in what you see on your screen, our mobility issues survey that we conducted back in June. Not only was the technical working group involved, but all of our stakeholders were involved in that. And I'm going to review some details of that. We also hosted a stakeholder workshop. We did 2 stakeholder workshops, one in English and one in Spanish. And that was focused a little bit more on our innovative strategies, which was followed up with a post-strategy or a post-workshop survey, which many of you participated in as well. And then we had a visionaries workshop, and our project manager for the consultant team, Debbie Lewing, Debbie will be sharing a little bit more about those initiatives. But I want to just remind us, if we could please go to the next slide, of the mobility issues survey. This was a tool that we used to gain input from the community members and our agency stakeholders and we were focused on 6 areas. safety, access, operations, wait times, information and amenities, and infrastructure. We had 64 responses, which was a good number of responses, and we shared those results. Now, if we can go to the next slide, please, Erica. Thanks so much. Just a couple of slides I want to highlight. So as we go through and we're taking a look at innovative strategies here in just a moment, we're kind of mentally checking back to what we heard were the issues at the border. This information is expanded upon in the outreach summary document that the team sent over and also in your agenda packet. So if you really want to dig into the issues more, there's lots of interesting details in your agenda packets. Here the participants were of the survey. Let us know across the category just some of the top areas of concern for all of our ports of entry. And here we can see with safety, accessibility was of concern, the lighting is of concern, signage, wayfinding, and broken infrastructure. When we look at the wait times category, wait times are too long, the process is confusing, not enough information on how long those wait times are, and information, wait time information is of concern. Access, we did hear that access to transit options on the Mexican side of the border is of concern. The distance between the port and the information and signage between the ports of entry makes those accessibility decisions difficult. For operations, we saw some concerns around staffing. We also, in the second icon under operations, we saw a lot of comments about the way that trucks and vehicles are queuing up, blocking local access roads, that modernization processes were slow, and secondary processes too time consuming and confusing. Our information category kind of re-emphasizing not enough information between ports of entry, and then information about accessing transit were all of concern. In the amenities section, a lot of comments about pedestrian amenities, restrooms, Wi-Fi, things of that nature, and also questions or concerns about lack of bicycle infrastructure and amenities. On the next slide, please. Thank you. We've also focused some of our questions around commercial vehicles and our good movement operations. If we kind of take a scan read of these icons, under the safety, we see the infrastructure, broken, missing pieces of infrastructure. Truck parking is a concern, safety in truck parking, and the timing and the coordination of the signals around the border crossings. Excuse me, for our commercial vehicle folks. Wait times, again, too long, confusing, and another part that we heard about was that they're not running, truck drivers are finding that they're not running on time for their deliveries as a result of wait time issues. Accessibility, again, information between ports of entry here for our commercial vehicle operations. I'm trying to make decisions. Should we go over to another port of entry? Not enough information there. Operations, we see again, the queues are backing up. Processes, modernization process, we know they're happening, but they're slow. And the staffing is another area of concern. Information, we're kind of seeing the same ideas, not a lack of clear information between ports of entry and regarding wait times. And we are also seeing under amenities that there may be a lack of commercial vehicle lanes, lack of fast lanes, and the Wi-Fi problems at the border. So that's a quick step through of just some of the top high-level concerns that we heard. Like I said, in the packets, both the agenda packet and the information that you received today, there are many more details. But as we shift to the next slide, please, Eric, I wanted to ask Debbie to come online. And Debbie, you want to talk a little bit about the workshops?
Yes, thank you so much, Elizabeth. Good morning, everybody. So I'll go over the next couple of items that had input into the innovative strategies. So after we had this mobility issues survey that Elizabeth just talked about and the results, we had this stakeholder workshop, and I believe all of you were actually invited, as well as a few other border stakeholders and groups. So the point of that was to present the results of the mobility issues survey, which you just heard, and introduce an initial list of innovative strategies that we had started, as well as prompt the forthcoming innovative strategy survey, which I'll talk about in just a moment. So everyone was invited to this particular stakeholder workshop, and we had them on July 8th in both in English version and the Spanish version. So we had 39 folks attend the English and 17 attend the Spanish. So again, we wanted to just to introduce the results of the survey, as well as prompt the next piece of it while sharing information along the way. Next slide, please. So then this innovative strategy survey ran from July 21st to 28th. So this was sent out after the stakeholder workshop. And we asked folks to validate what they had heard in terms of the potential innovative strategies at that point in the master list that we had. You know, what sounded good to you? What sounds, you know, what are we missing? What are any gaps? So we asked them to fill in anything that they thought should also be added to the master list of innovative strategies. So we had a pretty good response. We had 30 responses total, and 23, we had the English and Spanish survey. So we had 23 English responses and 7 Spanish responses. And these are pretty comprehensive. We got a lot of great comments from this one, and we were able to validate the ideas that we already had, as well as add some new ones to our master list. Next slide, please. So after we've been adding to this innovative strategies list, we're kind of going through it, and we wanted to have one more stakeholder contribution, and this was the Visionaries Workshop, which was held on August 12th. So we had you know, been concocting this list, and we wanted to fill in any missing gaps and some other ideas that we hadn't heard before. So what we did is we hand selected a group of visionaries, and these folks were from academia, they're from regional agencies, as well as some smart and innovation oriented stakeholders. We came up with a total of 8, and that was a small group. We had these interactive exercises that we had them be a part of to really drill down and get to the meat of those ideas. And these series of exercises that they participated in were meant to generate some more wow potential innovative strategies. We asked them to think big, and we put them through 3 main exercises. So these are detailed, and the process is detailed out in the memo as part of task 4 in your TWG agenda package. But we put them through the rapid fire idea generation. They were able to vote on kind of those ideas that came about. Then we kind of had them do sort of a Shark Tank inspired pitch exercise. So we kind of talked through, you know, the case for some of the top ideas. And then we took some of those top ideas and put them through what you see here on the bottom right, the desirability, viability, and feasibility exercise. So you see some of those ideas there that are being moved around in this virtual whiteboard. So go ahead and come to the next slide, please. So these are further detailed out, and there's a whole process again in your agenda package, but I just wanted to show you briefly some of the top ideas that came out that were discussed throughout the Visionaries Workshop. Next slide, please. Do we have any questions on the stakeholder outreach pieces, the 2 workshops, and the 2 surveys?
Thank you, Debbie. And do we have? Thank you, Elizabeth. Do we have any questions for Debbie and Elizabeth on the different outreach strategies that we conducted during the summer? And remember, to ask a question, please raise your hand. That icon is on the lower part of your screen, and just click the icon, and I'll see if you have a question. And to ask that question, remember to unmute yourself. I'll be calling you. I'll be calling on you by name. Everyone is really quiet today. Let's see. Nobody has any questions or comments so far? Okay. I don't see any question or comments. And just as a reminder, the full details of this item are included in your agenda package. If you have any further comments, or if you haven't had a chance to look at the agenda package or this technical memo, we'll appreciate your comments. If you can send your comments to us by next Friday, September 18, 2020. Thank you. And Elizabeth?
I want to go ahead and go to the next section here, Jose. I was just going to add, if anyone happens to have trouble with raising the hand or muting and unmuting, you can type a question to us in the chat, because now we're getting to really a really juicy part of our time together here today. We're going to talk about innovative strategies and share a little bit about our approach to developing the project team's approach to developing these so far. And we really need your engagement here. So you shall be quiet no longer. And just a little bit, we have a lot of details to go through. And so I'm encouraging you again to take a look at your agenda packet or follow along on this screen. And can we go to the next slide, please? And before we jump into the innovative strategies, which I'll do in just a moment to great fanfare and with a drum roll, I want to again remind you of objectives. So a moment ago, we kind of looked at the issues. The technical working group, we also worked with you to develop these objectives. So on the screen and in your packets are the objectives for the project. We want to make sure, a few meetings back in May, I think, I kind of asked you to think about which of these objectives speak to you, which ones you want to kind of champion. So today, as we're going through the strategies, I'm hopeful that someone kind of has their eye at, looking for mode shift strategies, efficient movement, first last mile, and perhaps someone else is looking at environment or coordination efforts, mobility information, and then the economy, resiliency, healthy communities, goods movement, and the high-speed connections. And those are our objectives that you see on the screen here. And if you have your agenda packet nearby, or like Cheryl and Jose and I, we have 3 to 4 different screens up. So hopefully you have it up on one screen and can reflect back on these objectives. Let's go to the next slide, please. So earlier, Debbie and I shared with you the engagement process of surveys and workshops that led to this master list of, oh gosh, Dawn, I don't remember if we came up with a number, but it must have been nearly 100 different strategies. And we took a look at those strategies and grouped them into categories that we're going to share with you today. There are 3 main categories, well, 3 categories, period. We're going to look at strategies that are people movement strategies. And the next category are goods movement. And the third category are collaboration and coordination strategies, which I'm excited to hear about those. And so we did group into categories, and then in some cases we group strategies into those, within those categories, to present this streamlined list of strategies today. Let's go to the next slide, please. And I'm just pausing for a moment because I know that Carlos is interpreting. And this next slide, there are a lot of words on it, and we do want to hear back from you, from our working group here, about the categories that we've divided the strategies into, and the vision statements to support each of those categories. Now, previously we had worked together on the vision statement for the entire border region, and you can see it here: to promote efficient mobility, modernize border management and operation systems, improve the experience of border crossers, and create a sustainable and resilient border region. In just a moment, my colleagues are going to share, Debbie's going to talk a little bit about our people movement strategies, Juan Villa is going to talk about goods movement, and Don Murphy is going to talk about coordination and collaboration. And they'll take a look at these vision statements as well. But I think with that, if we go to the next slide, please, Erica. This is where if I had a drum to drum roll, I would get ready to drum roll, because Debbie's going to take us through the people movement strategies. So pay a close attention and pull out your agenda packet to take a look at these strategies. Debbie?
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. So we'll get right into it. So again, we divided it into 3 categories, so the various innovative strategies. And we'll go through this first one in detail. So we'll kind of go through the vision. We'll talk a bit about the specific innovative strategies that are part of the category. And then we'll go through some interactive stories that are meant to show how the various innovative strategies may interact, or how someone might experience them as they cross the border. So just a quick overview with these vision here. So people movement, this encompasses, pedestrians, cyclists, transit, passenger vehicles, any people movement versus kids movement. And the goal here is to promote and facilitate the efficient, safe, secure, and sustainable movement across the border using innovative programs and strategies, technology solutions, operational improvements, and infrastructure investments. Next slide, please. So this is just an overview of the people movement strategies. We'll be going through each of these briefly following the slide. And just wanted to call your attention here to the readiness column on the right side. You see there are some options for short to medium term, or short term or medium term on their own. And what these mean is that we rank them by this readiness factor because we wanted to show or highlight certain programs that were short term, meaning that they're pretty much ready for implementation. There's very little or almost no barriers to implementation, and probably in the 0 to 5 year time frame. So the medium term could be ones that are give or take about 5 to 10 years out. There's maybe some challenges to technology, or that's still being worked out. It's not quite ready yet for prime time. And there might be some agency barriers or things that we have to get ready prior to an agreements that need to be in place before that particular strategy can be implemented. So let's go to the next slide. So I'll be going through these pretty quickly, but feel free to ask any questions at the end of this little section here, or type them in the chat as I'm going through them. And I'm happy to give some more detail as we do. So this first one is enhanced priority processing for pedestrians and cyclists. And this one kind of has a couple of subcomponents. So prime time crossing might be prioritizing pedestrian and cyclist crossing times, particularly at prime time, or when the weather, as we know very well this week, is quite warm during the middle of the day. Want to make sure we get those folks processed as fast as possible. That might also consist of thermal or biometric detectors and MAC address matching. And these are some fancier words, but basically meaning that they would help identify with sensors and detectors, identify the person that's crossing matches the documentation that is being provided. So after folks would go through these detectors, and that's an expedited process, folks don't really have to stop and talk to an officer, and they would go through a trusted traveler pathway that continues to verify their identity, and it's a shaded area, so it's not exposed to the elements, and that would allow them to cross the border in a seamless manner. And based on which of these are implemented, it could be a short to medium term strategy. Next slide. Next one is pre-crossing check-in and reading of POVs. So you can pre-register as a crosser to get a crossing time, like an appointment time, and this helps distribute demand at the border so we don't all cross the border at the same time. And this can be done via an app or a border kiosk that can be found at a smart mobility center, which I'll go through in just a moment. And again, depending on these subcomponents, these might be short to medium term strategies. Next slide, please. This next one is called a daily trusted traveler program. And that mostly consists of a daily or frequent commuter pass. So all the details of a particular person would already be logged into this trusted traveler program, as you see in the picture here. Anyone that's crossing on a daily basis or frequent basis can simply kind of recheck in every day. They don't have to put in all their details every time, and they're already ready to go. And this could be a short-term strategy. Next slide. So to benefit all that and kind of make it a little more streamlined for folks to cross the border, of course, we don't want to miss pedestrian and cyclist amenities and benefits. So of course, these would complement any pre-crossing check-ins. These would be available at the Smart Mobility Center, as well as at the border itself. And some of these amenities might include, shade and cool zones, particularly now, any charging stations, benches, seating, lighting to increase the perception of safety. And of course, we also want to have real-time information and signage available via app or on signage that's actually at the facility. This will help enhance wayfinding to folks that are passing through the border and to illustrate various mobility options that they might have. So this could be a short-term strategy. Next slide. So this next one here is dedicated bicycle lanes and network. And this was actually brought up and revalidated several times, particularly at our Visionaries workshop. And this is to help enable priority crossings. Many folks right now, cross border on in their cars, and it's there's often long lines. So we want to incentivize folks to be able to cross via alternative modes. So what you see here in the picture is a shared bike network, and folks can check in and rent a bike essentially to cross the border. And this might also extend to working with the local municipalities adjacent to the border to expand and connect bike lanes to the surrounding communities, because we want to be able to make sure that folks that are on their bikes can actually access the border crossing at a first last mile scale as well. And this could be a short-term strategy, could potentially medium-term as well. Next slide. So we get to the Smart Mobility Center, and some of you may have heard the term Mobility Hub, and this would be pretty similar as well. We want to call out the smart portion of it. So this is essentially a multimodal transportation hub. There's various amenities available here. There's different modes that you can access. It's a first last mile hub. You can find different modes to take based on where you're trying to go. And this really helps facilitate some seamless travel connections as well. And this can be a short-term strategy. Next slide. So this next one we called cross-border transit service. Right now, there's not really a specific, public transit service that goes across the border. There are some, barriers to making sure folks are already vetted through the customs and immigration. And there are some private coaches that go across right now, but this would be advantageous to have something that goes to specific destinations that are popular for certain daily commuters. And this service would ideally be available in both directions, again, with pre-screened travelers. This might be an opportunity to partner with a private entity, and this could be potentially a more flexible or mobility as a service model as well. And we see this as a medium-term strategy. Next slide. This one I think most folks have heard of in some form or another. This is integrated traveler information, and this is being able to kind of look at all your different options for moving and crossing the border, on your app or on some sort of digital device. And this interface would be integrated with your smartphone app, so you're able to see it on the go, and it shows you real-time information. And this helps improve your trip planning in case there's an accident or an incident that comes up. You're able to, in real time, adjust your route, and also shows you the wait time and travel time data as well. And just knowing this information can help ease some traveler uncertainty, and this is a short-term strategy. Next slide. And this last one here, dynamic lane operations. So we mentioned that we want to, on this next border master plan, encourage more multimodal options, not just crossing via car. So based on demand and historical data, the ability to be able to change lanes to whatever is needed would be a great advantage. So, and not doesn't just include commercial and passenger vehicles, that also includes bike lanes, pedestrian lanes, to be able to accommodate the demand that comes across. This would be a potentially short-term strategy. Next slide. So I've kind of gone through the various innovative strategies we have in our people movement category. I'm going to go through two stories here that kind of illustrate again how the various innovative strategies might be experienced, how they might work together to help create a more seamless crossing experience for the person that's crossing the border. So we'll have two. So this one is about Isabella. She is a student at San Diego State University. She lives in Tijuana, and she's going to cross the border to go to school. So first she kind of checks in this first little square up here on the top left. She checks in and kind of rents a bike to ride to the Smart Mobility Center, which is the next slide over in the middle. So she checks her bike in, and then she starts to cross the border. Again, that Smart Mobility Center has various amenities, so maybe she grabs a coffee on the way, some other things that she needs to get taken care of, or drops off her dry cleaning or whatever it is to help take care of some of her errands. So then you'll see that border line. She crosses the border and she goes through an enhanced priority processing because she's in a trusted traveler program. So she just checks in. She almost doesn't have to stop. They verify her details and she keeps walking through this trusted traveler pathway. As you'll see on the next line below, she keeps going. They verify that it's her. She crosses the border and she comes out at the San Ysidro Transit Center. She takes the trolley to the 8th Street Transit Center on the bottom left, and then she's able to make her way to San Diego State University. So she experiences a couple of different innovative strategies, and this would be in the future. Next slide, please. So this next one is about a business executive that lives in Manhattan Beach, which is, if you're not familiar with it, is a city close to Los Angeles International Airport in Los Angeles County. And you're like, well, that's quite far. So we'll kind of detail out how he gets across the border. So he lives in Manhattan Beach and he needs to go to Ciudad Industrial in Mexico. So he, he's a business exec. He's got a bit of a luxury, but he's able to make a parking reservation at the high-speed rail station near LAX, and he parks his car there and he's able to get on the high-speed rail that takes him all the way from Los Angeles all the way down to San Ysidro. And on the way, it doesn't take too long. It's a high-speed rail after all. So he's able to pre-check in on the middle left here. With his trusted traveler program. It verifies his details. It's already in there. He just checks in, letting customs know that he is going to be crossing the border, so they know that he's coming. And then so he arrives at San Ysidro. He's already done some work and started his day. He crosses through the Smart Mobility Center that receives him where the high-speed rail station is. And then he's able to very easily cross the border. Again, just like Isabella in the previous story, he goes through some enhanced priority processing, basically just walks through, they verify his details. He's already checked in. He goes through the trusted traveler pathway as well. Here it's shaded. They're still verifying his identity. And then he comes out on bottom left here, and he's able to pre-reserve a car actually on demand, and that car is waiting for him, and he gets to get in that car, and then that car takes him to Ciudad Industrial. So all the various innovative strategies that he's experienced are listed here on the right. Next slide, please. I'll turn it back to you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thanks so much, Debbie. I was listening to you share those user stories, and I'm ready to zap us out of 2020 and into the future, out of 2020 period, and into the future when we can be pedestrians crossing the border with these innovative strategies. I see Jose smiling. So And now we want to hear from you. Do you feel the same as me? Are we ready to zap past 2020? Now we'll leave that one lie and just assume everyone agrees. But let's talk about these innovative strategies. So in just a moment, Jose, we'll ask folks to open up the mic. So I think we have about 5, 7, or 8 minutes that we want to hear from you about these people movement strategies. And there's a few questions that I would like to ask you to reflect upon. Also take a look at page 14 in your agenda packet if you didn't have that open. That gives you a nice overview of the strategies that Debbie just spoke about. And I want to ask you to think about this, these questions, excuse me. You know, do these strategies truly enhance and improve people movement to and from and across our border? You know, what challenges do we foresee as, you know, kind of thinking about those stories? What strategies do we see through those, you know, kind of challenges that we see through those stories and with our strategies list? And, you know, does the list seem comprehensive based on, you know, all of your inputs to date and the other input sources that we talked about? You know, does the list seem comprehensive? So there's a few prompting questions on the screen, but Erica, I was going to ask you, can you go back up to the slide that has the summary of each of the people movement strategies? It'll be that gray slide. And so Jose, with that, if we can prompt everyone to raise their hand, or if you're having an issue with that, type into the chat box. But we're looking for some feedback.
Yes. Yeah, we would like to hear your feedback as our team just mentioned. A lot of these ideas came from the workshops and the surveys that we conducted during the summer. And some of them came from you. And we would like to hear from you. What do you think about them? Should we start looking at this type of innovative strategies? Do you have a particular question on one of the strategies, or should we focus on a strategy? So if you have any questions, remember you can raise your hand. I'll be calling on you by name. Please remember to unmute yourself. So if you're not able to do it, you can type your question in the chat box, and we'll be happy to read it. Remember to access the chat box or the raise hand, just go to the lower end of your screen. And yeah, so we would like to hear from you.
You know, Jose, I was thinking about some of our colleagues here on the technical working group that, you know, reside on the Mexican side of the border and are frequent pedestrian crossers. If we maybe can hear from any of those folks.
Sure.
I want to double check that. Is the hand raising function actually working?
Okay, I see somebody who just raised their hand. Let's see. Enrique Ramirez. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, my name is Enrique Ramirez. Yeah, I think these strategies are on par and they're pretty good. I was one of the ones that worked with the working group and recommended border crossing for pedestrians and bikes over there on Via de la Amistad over there in Imperial Beach and Playas de Tijuana. That would enhance another opening of, we don't have to have another vehicle crossing like we stated, but this is the pedestrian and bicycle, and maybe people could, you know, get there through bus and then cross, and it's just a specific pedestrian and crossing of bicycles, and it would eliminate people getting in their cars or heading out to the San Isidro or the Otay Mesa border. So I mean, this expands and it helps mitigate all the traffic and all concentration of people in certain areas. So yeah, these are great, very good.
Thank you, Enrique. Can you just lower your hand? That way, anybody else has any comment or question on these people movement strategies? Okay, so let's continue. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. I unmuted myself. let's do, Jose, we do want to hear from folks. And so if this format isn't working, as we wrap up the work session today, we're going to ask that folks email some responses back. So let's keep that in mind, but we'll consider that the people movement category is looking comprehensive. Enrique is commenting that it feels good to him. So, if there's something that you need to hear more about, make sure you're following up with us. Yeah, Jose, you want to add something?
Yeah, and I just want to remind everybody that in our previous border master plans, and we're actually gonna go over that on the last item of our agenda. We did a call for projects, a call for transportation projects, and a call for port of entry projects. But within this BMP, and we're also going to do that. We're going to be evaluating and ranking your transportation and port of entry projects. But the other thing that we've been asked to do with this the 2028 Border Master Plan is to think outside of the box, to start thinking about different ideas, different approaches, different strategies that we can start implementing at the border, so we can improve our mobility. And these are some ideas, like Elizabeth and Debbie just mentioned, that some of the ideas that came from you, they came from the workshops, they came from the surveys that we conducted during the summer, and we're trying to get your feedback from them. These ideas are not going to be ranked. They're not going to be, we're going to be grouping them and organize them, but we don't have a methodology to evaluate these particular ideas, because a lot of them are concepts that we probably should be start looking at them with more detail. So I see a couple of people that have raised their hand. Mikhail from CBP. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, Jose. Thank you.
And then Anthony.
Yeah, so this is Mikhail Pavlov with CBP. So I appreciate some of these ideas. I just note that they all kind of fall in three categories. I mean, there's three parts to them. What I meant to say is that, the first part is getting to the border. Second part is crossing through. And the third part is getting away from the border, hopefully to the city center or to your destination. There's not, an idea that is a trusted traveler getting into a secure, trusted terminal and crossing the border simultaneously, seamlessly to get out on the other side. You guys are thinking big, and I like some of this thinking. Some of it is futuristic and would be difficult to implement, but maybe one of the thoughts should be, getting cleared through, if we're talking far out, if we're thinking far out, maybe just getting some sort of, I'm not sure how that could be implemented, but some sort of a secure terminal for passengers that would be trusted passengers that have been pre-screened, that would be securely getting onto some sort of vehicle and crossing the border without stopping, unless it's a random occasional check, and just getting out away from the border on the Mexican side. So that would be something that would be a single goal versus 3 steps. And again, because you're thinking so far out, I just want to throw that out there.
No, and I think if that idea is actually capturing one of our innovative streets. I mean, right now we're just this is just a brief, like an overview of some of these ideas. If you want to go into the details of them, you can look at the technical working group. The technical memorandum that we attached to the agenda, and actually we have that concept and we call it the trusted traveler pathway, I believe. Or remind me, Debbie or Elizabeth.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, then you
okay.
got
yeah.
There's also there's also PM7, the cross-border transit service, has a little bit of that. So if Mikkel can take a look at that and have comments, that would be great too.
Definitely. Yeah. So do you have anything else to add, Mikkel?
No, that was it for me.
Thank you. And Anthony, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I sure can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, first of all, I want to kind of build on what Mikhail said. In a lot of ways, some of the things that you're talking about as far as the border crossing itself exists. Trusted traveler exists. There's the kind of the expedited processing for pedestrians. I concur completely that the more people we can get out of cars and get it crossing the border as pedestrians, the better. And I think that those of us who are involved in the development of ports of entry really are looking at opportunities to improve the infrastructure in place that kind of allows for a lot of the expediting of trusted travelers, because that's the more people we can get in those programs, the more efficient the environment is for everyone. It appears to me, in just looking at this, that a big part of what you're focusing on is really last mile kind of connections and connectivity. And so, we can kind of talk about it as far as these people movement strategies, but really it feels like it comes down to last mile connections. How do we get people from where they are to an existing transit connection to the border, and then away from the border, and then that last mile to their next connection. And so, I think that they're kind of basic concepts in transit. And I think it's important to look at it, but I think that trying to brand it as being border specific is difficult. I think the same transit and people movement issues that we have across the entire transportation network.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think we agree with your assessment. So the idea is to actually to create or to improve the national transportation system that it connects better with both the Baja transportation system, both public and private, and also with the California transportation system.
Yeah, I'll just say that San Diego has the absolute best problems as far as border connectivity, because I mean, again, there is a good, solid, established transportation and transit network on both sides of the border, and a lot of it just falls into how do we handle the last mile component, which is the part that really makes it difficult for a lot of people to utilize transit efficiently.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anything else, Anthony? Okay.
No, that's it. Thank you.
And okay, thank you. Enrique?
Well, I have one more one more item that I just thought of. My name is Enrique with Caltrans. When you cross into the border, you have to fill out as a pedestrian or a cyclist, I believe, you have to fill out on the Mexican side an FMA, like a card. So that would be one thing that if we could look at to expedite, because when you cross through vehicles, you don't have to fill out that form, but when people walk, the Mexican side is making people fill out that form and stopping them and sometimes rejecting them. So we could have all that down. It'll be a smoother transition.
Like maybe online, they can fill out that form online or something.
Well, yeah, you can fill it out online like nowadays, but you still have to provide it to them. So if there was like an app, like you said, and they could have it digitized, that would reduce paperwork or whatever it takes.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, can both Anthony and Enrique lower your hand? That way I know that you guys been taken care of. Anybody else?
Jose, did you see, we do have a comment from Frank Riviera. I don't know if you wish to unmute and chime in, but Frank shared with us. Yeah, there he is.
Good afternoon, Frank Rivera, Chula Vista. I just think that it's when we had several years ago, the bike rentals that would cross the border, that really changed the number of people crossing, and they went over into the vehicle lanes. And with the proximity Chaparral, that crossing over there towards the mall area, there's bike lanes over in that part of the San Diego, that maybe PM1 and PM3 are very easy to implement. PM4 and 5, I mean, they're all kind of linked together. That's why I put the four of them together, that it's something that is low cost. I think it's easily implementable. And they kind of, to me, I looked at those as four that could be grouped together.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Thank
see what
you.
you're saying there. We'll take note of that. Thanks, Jose. I think
Frank.
with that, Jose,
Okay.
yeah, sorry to speak over. I was just going to say, if
Yeah.
there aren't any other questions, we can move into goods movement.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, team.
Thank you, Jose. So I can do my pretend drum roll again. So let's shift gears. Thanks for your comments. Comments aren't closed. We want to hear from you by email on the people movement strategies, but my friend and colleague Juan Villa is going to come online here. Thanks, Erica. Let's go one more slide there, please. And Juan, let's talk with the technical working group a little bit about our goods movement strategies that we've prepared.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Yeah, we did the same, we followed the same process to group all the goods movement strategies, and we came up with this vision, which is basically to use technology, operations, and infrastructure for a safe, sustainable, and efficient flow of goods through the border. Next slide, please. So again, we started with about 45 different strategies, and we, as I mentioned, follow the process to group them first into these categories. And we came up with these 9 strategies that we see here. Next. Some of them are, again, as I mentioned, infrastructure, some of them are technology, and some of them are processes. As Anthony mentioned, there's different ways that you can group them, and some of them are easier to implement than others. For example, this one, unified cargo processing. This is already implemented at some POEs and has been proved to be very successful. Both US and SAT inspections take place at the same location, and that expedites the crossing for trucks. So again, this is a short-term strategy that could be implemented or is being implemented as we speak. Next. The second one is also something that has been already proposed at different POEs, is to have an appointment and arrival window system and a staging area. So again, similar to the comments we just heard right now, to have that from Mikael, something that we can have a secure location where, in this case, trucks and drivers and the cargo can be waiting to cross with a specific system. And again, this is medium term because there's some specifics that need to be worked out, because you need to have a location. Some of the land POEs, they don't have enough space, or it will be important to secure the drive from this particular location to the actual border. Next. This is the dynamic lane operation that OME is planning to have, basically to be more flexible with infrastructure that is available. So depending on the demand, you can actually define whether if it's a fast, regular, empty, or UCP, and then you can move the lanes according to demand, and be able to provide this information to the user, to the truck driver in advance, so they know which lanes are operating which type of traffic. Next. Flexible hours of operation, responding to demand. Again, that's something that has been proposed and tested. The key point here is to be able to agree among all the stakeholders about these hours, especially shippers and carriers. They have to have enough demand so CBP and SAT can have staffing to be able to process those shipments in a more efficient way. Next. The next one we came up with the improved security and safety inspections with using technology. either pre-screening or pre-dispatch system using biometrics. That's been tested for POVs, for pedestrians as well. So again, this is something that basically requires technology and also requires coordination among the stakeholders. Next one. This is something that we identified from both, from you stakeholders, especially from produce, produce manufacturers and shippers. The CityPath and FAST program was defined basically in 2001 for manufacturing products. However, it's difficult to secure the whole supply chain for produce or that come from Mexico into the US. So the objective of this strategy is to define this new CityPath FAST program for produce that they can somehow be able to secure, to prove to CBP that there's this secure supply chain all the way from the origin to the border. Next. Using overweight truck corridors, that's also something that has been implemented, and it's very useful because that way you can reduce the number of trucks, and using weigh in motion, you can test, or you can make sure that the weight of that truck is within the limits. And again, the most important benefit is the reducing number of trucks, reducing number of shipments, and you can have a staging area, so those overweight trucks don't go all the way to the northern San Diego area, but they can stay in the area near the border where they can basically unload to the regular 80,000 pound limit in the US. Next. Basically, this one is a regional ITS system. Again, using all these technologies into a complete system where you can have probably a center where all the information is kept and then disseminated to all the different stakeholders, either real time or via messages, via different apps. So again, that's something that is being planned, and I think will be really useful and efficient to implement in the future. Next one. And the final is to have a tracking system, tracking and tracing system for shipments coming in from Mexico into the US side. And again, this one has has to be implemented in coordination with the security agents, with CBP and SAT, so that way information can flow in both directions to be able to have a secure travel information all the way from the origin to the destination. So as with the previous examples that Debbie showed us, we also prepared some stories just to put these strategies into perspective. Next one. So the first one is this shipment that I came up with. Basically, it's a container that arrived in Ensenada, and the shipper and the carrier get together and they decide to want to cross. So they go into the app and identify what's the best crossing time and the most efficient crossing location. They can submit the cargo, import, export, the e-manifest through the app, and then they start the trip. On the trip, they basically find information either in the mobile app or in the dynamic messaging signs, so they can check the status, all the way from Ensenada to the border. And then once they get close to the border, there's these streamlined inspections, either gamma ray, X-ray, dynamic lane, all these technologies that I described earlier. So that would make the border crossing very efficient. And the next story is a different shipment on the next slide. The next story is a shipment that comes all the way from Sonora. So this particular trucker obviously doesn't have, the ability to be on the fast lane because, again, as I mentioned earlier, it's difficult to secure the whole supply chain. So in the app, the driver identifies the best route and then the potential crossings that they can use. And then once it gets close to the border, there is this electrified truck stop with a reservation system. because he already reached his hours of operation, then he can stop and be able to to rest and to take a shower, eat, and then is waiting for the actual appointment to take place. And once it's ready, the driver can move all the way to the border crossing and then identify the best lane to be able to cross. So again, this is just two examples, or we try to put together most of the different strategies that we have identified into stories. So you can take a look and you can come up probably with some other stories yourself. So with that, I'll take it back to Elizabeth and Jose.
Stay with us, Juan and Jose. We have a question in the chat. I just want to remind folks, if you're following along in your agenda packet, the overview of the goods movement pieces is on 21 in your agenda packet. And Juan took us through, Jose, these these technologies that are really advancing and moving quite quickly, and I'm super excited to see our border region embracing some of these. We do have a question from Stephen in the chat. Stephen, I don't know if you want to open up your mic and talk to Juan directly, or I can read the question. And Erica, we go to the next slide, please. And just some reminders on what we're looking for here. Are these strategies, truly enhancing and improving goods movement to and from and across the border? What challenges do we foresee with perhaps the stories that Juan walked us through, or with the strategies? And does this list of goods movement strategies seem comprehensive? And thanks, Stephen. So Jose, did you want to say something, or you want to take a look at reading Stephen's question to Juan?
I can see it.
Yeah, do you want to read it, Juan?
Yeah, the question from Steve, having kids having lunch, is that have we considered inductive charging in the truck lanes to enable cross-border electric trucking? Yes, that's something that we have identified, because again, there's more and more, probably you read last week, there's some very interesting news about the electric trucks, and it's coming probably faster than we expected. But anyway, yes, we are considering those type of new technologies, hybrid or electric or any other things that we can also identify to make it more efficient. There was even discussion in the initial phases of the program to have a specific lane for electric trucks. That way you can have reduced emissions at the end. That's one of the goals that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. So yes, thanks for reminding us. And I think we should probably make sure that we include these very specifically in the discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Juan, and thank you, Stephen. Anybody else? If you have any question or comment for Juan, or if you have any, just raise your hand. Anthony.
So I was just going to mention that, we have seen certain DOTs elect to go to overweight truck permits in different regions. That takes close coordination with the facility operators at the ports of entry. I know in Texas, the ports weren't designed for some of the loads. Mm-hmm. And so we had issues where we had things like concrete failures. And essentially it became a tool for the DOTs to kind of create revenue streams. And the federal government was kind of left holding the costs associated with it. Fortunately, we had a more robust platform in Mariposa, so we were able to allow heavyweight shipments to come through. But again, that's something that can't be taken as a given. It's something that requires infrastructure to be in place to support those larger loads. And I just throw that out there as something that needs to be considered and thought of prior to moving into that environment.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and like I mentioned before, with people movement strategies, these good movement strategies also, what we're presenting today is the results from our outreach efforts during the summer. Some of these ideas came out from the workshops or from the surveys that we conducted. And the idea is to present these ideas to all of you, to get your feedback so we can improve them and present them to the Policy Advisory Committee next month. Anybody else has any question or comments to Juan?
And you know, Jose, just because we have a few minutes here, I was wondering if I could prompt.
Sure.
I know we have some of our colleagues from Otay Mesa East on the phone. I could start calling. I just was curious at how this was landing for maybe Maria or Mario. Sylvia, how are things sounding from your perspective? Just, you know, wanting to hear from a few folks here if you feel comfortable opening up. You want to talk to us a little bit, Mario?
Well, this is, I don't know if you can hear me.
We can, thank you.
Yes.
This is, you know, it's basically from our playbook. You know, all the appointment services, the segregating the traffic, the different strategies, tracking, pre-clearance. It's all within the strategies we're looking at Otay Mesa East. So it's just music to our ears that confirms that we're going in the right way. So that we really appreciate that. About the multi-mobility and enhancing, you know, those that last mile that both Anthony and Mikael were bringing up. I think we're putting my head as the person in charge of delivering the border projects in District 11. We're definitely there with you guys. I think that is the big challenge, and getting specifically for bikes, getting a good bike system that we can show to our federal partners that we would be capable of receiving and managing appropriately the bikes. Would probably motivate or get us to talk about how we can also set more dedicated lanes or ways of processing bicyclists eventually in the future. But the ball is on our court to figuring out that last mile segment, right? So no, definitely. And the innovations and goods movement, we love it. It's part of our playbook. I don't know if Maria and Carrie had any other comments.
Thanks so much, Mario. Yeah, Jose, I don't know if you want to comment on what Mario was saying there.
No, he did it perfectly.
Good.
Good. Well,
yeah.
Okay, so I see Anthony who just raised his hand.
Nope, that was an error.
Okay, that was a never mind.
Oh, okay.
Hand down.
Okay, anybody else?
You know, I was really thinking about the technologies that Juan was sharing with us, and I know we have some smart border folks on the call. It sounds like we're in alignment, but please, as you look through the list, I'm just double checking for any hands raised. You know, please, as you look through the list, make sure to get some comments back to us.
Mm-hmm. I see a comment from Mikael.
Yes.
Mikael?
Yes, can you hear me? So I just wanted to add, yes. You know, as we worked on a Texas border master plan, the guys came out and we had a session with the innovation group within CBP. And I just wanted to convey some of the key points that the headquarters mentioned CBP would be headed towards as far as technology. And the key point was the biometric scans, and more importantly, basically the cameras at the ports, right at the primaries, that would scan the facial features or the faces of not just the driver, but the passengers as well. I'm not sure how that's going to be accomplished in the end, but technology apparently exists or is on the verge of existing that would scan, like I said, the faces of the occupants of the vehicle, including, you know, penetrating through tinted glass and you know, some interesting facts like that. So that is where it's headed. So that would help, again, you know, address some of the time-consuming element of processing at the border, which is identification. right? So if you bounce those visuals off of some, federal database and you quickly identify who's actually in the car, then you don't even need to scan documents, and it streamlines the processing. But I want to make sure that you knew, I know I shared this with Mario and the team working on Otay Mesa East, but I want to make sure that the entire collective of folks working on the Baja California Border Master Plan knew that sooner or later CBP is going to embark on this path. This is what currently exists, is being tested in the air environment, the airports, or it used to be before COVID hit, or it probably still is. But whatever happens at the airport environment trickles down into land ports. That's how it historically has happened, and that's what's to come. I just want to share that bit of information with you. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Mikael.
Thank you, Mikael.
Any last question?
Anybody else? And can you lower your hand, Miguel? Thank you. Okay, let's continue with the presentation.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jose.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much, Juan, and folks for commenting there. And Don Murphy's turned his camera on so we can take a look at the next section. Can you go to the next slide, please? Don's going to talk to us a little bit about collaboration and coordination, a very important part of our border strategies here. Don, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, Jose. Yeah, so I'm covering the third grouping of innovative strategies, which basically are kind of a catch-all, but include a series of data and system strategies supporting the regional border efforts. And they also include some policies and planning and long-term efforts that come into play as well. So the whole point of this section is really trying to move towards more proactive management of the border region and treating it more as an entire network of our connecting facilities and ports of entry to make it, to improve our travel information, to improve our multimodal options and improve our resiliency, and ultimately over the longer term to improve our ability to plan for and respond to growth and change. Next slide, please. So there's 11 strategies in this category. We started with some good system strategies, but I'd like to give kudos to some of the workshop efforts. We really had some great input from stakeholders, particularly in some of these items relating to frameworks and studies and measurement processes and ways that we could try and make the whole environment more responsive to border crossers themselves. So a number of these we'll step through in detail, and you can see they're kind of range between the short and midterm, as you heard Debbie describe earlier. Next slide, please. So one of the things that was brought up was the opportunity that the border crossing process represents to educate people on both border crossing materials, information, challenges, procedures, and do this in a bilingual effort. So the opportunity to do this either online or a series of posted information. There was a lot of discussion that border crossing can be challenging or intimidating to a lot of folks, and that providing them information as they're actually approaching the border and trying to improve that and make it more dynamic would be beneficial. Next slide, please. This was the same thing, but a little more detailed in terms of almost like, I think Mikael mentioned airport, and taking some of the airport philosophies, if you will, and extending them further out so that people kind of know the procedures and processes they'll be facing, making sure they're utilizing the programs that they're part of, and understanding where to line up, which can be a challenge for people, particularly during longer wait periods. And just providing wayfinding. That was one of the recurring themes we heard from all the stakeholders, is challenges for wayfinding, particularly for people that just aren't daily crossers at the border. Next slide, please. One of the unique things that came up was there was a feeling by some of the stakeholders that we weren't really tapping into our private industry opportunities as much as we could. And this included the tech companies and the resources and the intellectual knowledge of the companies that are working on both sides of the border, and that there was an opportunity to kind of collaborate with some of the existing groups and extend that into what we call the private industry brain trust to help address some of these challenges and implement some of these innovative strategies that we've been talking about and move them along faster than might otherwise be the case. Next slide, please. There was a big discussion about performance metrics and monitoring. I think there's a lot of efforts to improve the network of data, border wait times and whatnot that we get on the border region overall. So we'll see that improve, but there was also the desire to make sure those metrics were transparent, or at least a lot of them were transparent and available to the public so they could understand what's going on. I think sometimes that information isn't as broadly available, or if you're in the know, you can get it from certain sources. But this would be kind of an expanded border performance monitoring metric system for both agency use as well as community stakeholder use. Next slide, please. This is probably the biggest one in this category, and to Mario's point of the playbook, the discussion of a regional border management system has been underway with agencies on both sides of the border for an extended period. Basically, this takes the traffic management concept that most of us are familiar with and expands that and addresses the specific characteristics of the border, as well as all the players. Obviously, there's a lot more players and agencies involved in the actual facilities, CBP, SAT, other agencies that are helping make those decisions. So this is really focused on an operational system to enhance binational information coordination, make sure that information is flowing freely, all the different parties in play in the border region know what's going on. Next slide, please. This is kind of an adjunct to that, and which is basically a region-wide binational border data warehouse. There's some examples of these in different locations, mostly focused on border crossing volumes and wait times, but this would be intended to be more comprehensive. And as we build out that sensor network, really build up all that information that we're collecting, both for operations purposes, but also for long-range planning purposes, so that we can understand the trends that are occurring and how they might be evolving over time. Next slide, please. There was a discussion that we have models. There's been a lot of work on trying to improve the models. This strategy was to try and take a fresh look at a comprehensive border region model that maybe could stretch all the way out in the area that's included in the border master plan, and kind of consider broader economic trends that could, what if conditions, how that impacts the border crossings, behaviors, and kind of treat kind of one model to bring everything together, if you will, as opposed to a network of various models that might be in different states or using different assumptions to some extent. Next slide, please. There were a number of studies that several of the stakeholders felt needed to be undertaken. One was a review and recognition or an assessment of the informal economy activity that occurs at the border, and how well we do a job of addressing that or not addressing it, as the case may be, and the importance of that overall. The other was the feeling that the question of, for those people that are really using the border crossing on a most regular basis, how well are we doing in terms of addressing their needs and the facility improvements and everything else that's underway. There was some stakeholders that felt that maybe a lot of the things that had been done maybe embrace the higher end or higher income or more classic crossers rather than than the whole broader group of crossers that do regular crossings. The last study was an assessment of as we evolve as a border region and we're working in a more integrated fashion, is there a need to look at updating or refining the framework in which we all make planning and even more frequent decisions about the border systems itself. Next slide, please. Another thing that came out of the visionary workshop that was interesting is a lot of times we ask all the cities to participate or smaller agencies, and it was pointed out that all the agencies don't have a real depth of resources, or they may not have people specialized in each area that's being undertaken and related to the border region. And that some of those agencies would like to participate, but they could use some guidance or supporting resources to really make the most of their participation effort. Just basically, if you don't have a lot of resources, it's hard to participate in all the activities, much less in some of these implementation programs that we've been discussing. So the idea would maybe some of the larger agencies or a regional program could help support those smaller players that don't have quite the same level of resources. Next slide, please. There was also an emphasis on new ways of getting community feedback from people crossing the border and making them feel that they are at least being heard and understood. So there was some discussion about methods to do this, and some of this stems from the smart city concepts that have been developing across the globe over the last few years. But basically an app or a method for people to provide input and a way for the binational agency stakeholder community to distribute properly and try and respond to those, or at least acknowledge the community feedback they're receiving. Next slide, please. And the last one is actually an update to the collaboration management framework. And this, again, it looks towards as Otay Mesa East comes online and some of the facility expansions are completed, and we're trying to operate in a much more interactive fashion as a broader network. What does that imply in terms of our coordination and the level of coordination, as well as our day-to-day management and feedback loop for binational management of everything that's going on. Next slide, please. So the story in this section relates to the regional border management system and a major incident, and kind of steps through an example of how that could help agencies respond to or understand a situation. The example gives a major accident by a couple trucks on the freeway north of a port of entry, which results in a fire and a response by emergency services. And throughout this time, the whole intent of the system is to make sure that information is firstly being distributed across all the different agencies, even if it's outside. In this case, it's not within the federal compound, but informing them what's going on so they can make judgments about what needs to be done on their end, as well as making sure that that information is also getting updated into the public venue so that they can respond to it appropriately and in a more timely fashion. And this gets back to the feeling that a lot of the information is disjointed, or it may be sometimes delayed or old by the time the public receives it, so they're not making the best decisions that they could. In this case, the fire leads to an emergency services response, a closure of the highway, and ultimately a temporary closure of a port of entry and a diversion of traffic to other nearby ports of entry to try and alleviate the backup and demand on that closed port. And then that's followed up with a post-incident analysis where everybody can kind of sit down and say, okay, what worked well? What can we do better next time? So with that, I think that completes the collaboration coordination section. We can go to the next slide.
Thanks, Don. And I think Jose is going to come on and take a few questions. But if I'm hearing us right, we are moving people, we're moving goods, and we're all working together. That's the collaboration effort. And so we do have some questions to reflect upon here. If you're playing along at home, as you should be, page 25 in your agenda packet is the summation of these collaboration strategies. So again, kind of thinking about, are these strategies enhancing and improving collaboration and coordination across the border? You know, what challenges do we foresee? And is this list that Don shared with us that you can see beginning on 25 in your agenda packet, you know, is it comprehensive for collaboration? So Jose, I know we had a lot of comments as we were building this strategy list around collaboration and coordination. As we prepare to take questions, what would you like to add to our conversation?
Yeah, Elizabeth, thank you. Yeah, when we were having like the workshops and the surveys, one of the things that came up again and again was we need to start. How can we work better? How can we collaborate between us? How can we improve the communication? And some of these are some of these strategies are some ideas that came out of the workshop and the workshops and the surveys. So, but we would like to hear from you and get your feedback. And like Elizabeth mentioned, if you want more information on these ideas, you can go back to the technical memo, to your agenda package, and yeah, and again, if you have any question or comment, please raise your hand. Do we have any comments for Dawn on this item? I don't see anybody.
Yeah, I was just double checking. So I could ask people to reflect on this, but you know, I do just want to encourage, you know, participants on both sides. You know, I see it as one side, right? We're all the regional border system. But if any of the representatives from Mexico have comments around the collaboration strategies or any of the strategies, we'd love to hear from you. So with that, Jose, we're looking for a couple hands to be raised.
Yeah, ¿algún comentario? Sí, algún comentario sobre estas estrategias de nuestras agencias mexicanas. No sé, Carlos López, Fonsedur, ciudades de Tijuana, Mexicali, Tecate, o el gobierno federal de mexicano, ¿algún comentario?
Sí, José, ¿me escuchan, José? Carlos López.
Sí.
Estoy viendo un trabajo muy completo. Estamos viendo un trabajo muy completo. Este tema de Don me interesó mucho. El tema también de transporte. Veo que es un Border Master Plan actualizado que puede servir para otros estados fronterizos, como sucedió en el pasado Border Master Plan. Creo que puede ser un ejemplo, un buen ejemplo, con todas estas innovaciones que se están proponiendo. Me gustaría, sin embargo, también que SCT y SAT Aduana federales, dependencias federales, emitieran algún comunicado, alguna opinión. De parte de SIDUR, Gobierno del Estado, es un magnífico documento lo que estoy viendo, con bastante material innovador. Y sí, como dice Michael, como dice Anthony, del Gobierno Federal de Estados Unidos, creo que sí tenemos que analizar un poco más los detalles, como dijo Anthony y Michael. Un poco más los detalles, porque hay algunos servicios que ya se están dando y habría un poquito en caso peatonal, un poquito de conflicto para poder tener carriles, como dicen, carriles especiales. Por la confianza, como dicen, aunque ya está el Sentry peatonal como un carril confiable, pero pudiéramos ir más allá. Me gustó mucho lo de transporte, creo que es buena idea el escuchar a los equipos transportistas, a las empresas transportistas, como mencionaron, es muy buena idea, como dice Elizabeth, como dice Don, y poder tener un poco más aterrizada la idea. Pero vamos bastante bien, felicidades, vamos bastante bien en innovación con esta actualización del Border Master Plan. José, de verdad, felicidades.
Muchísimas gracias, Carlos. Sí, pues hemos tratado de ser más innovadores. Y recuerden que si, para las personas que nos escuchan en español, en la parte de abajo hay un icono que tiene un mundo, y ustedes pueden seleccionar el idioma que deseen. Así, así no tiene ningún problema con la interpretación. So for those who you missed the interpretation, remember that at the lower end of your screen there's an icon with a world, and you can just select your language. That way you can hear the interpreter in case somebody speaks in Spanish and you don't understand Spanish. So tenemos un comentario de Elia. Elia, ¿te gustaría decirlo a voz? Nomás ponte, te puedes poner on mute.
Yo nada más, bueno, reconocer el trabajo que se ha realizado, la importancia de la participación en estos grupos focales y decirles que pues por parte de nosotros desde Mexicali nos gusta mucho el enfoque humano que le están dando a las estrategias y donde estamos viendo o identificando que la prioridad va a ser que cuando menos nosotros que vivimos en esta franja fronteriza y que vemos todos estos temas binacionales como algo muy, muy cotidiano, pues se normalice, ¿no? Y tengamos esta facilidad y esta afluencia mucho más rápida de hacer nuestra vida aquí y allá sin que se presenten tantos obstáculos. Entonces, las estrategias a corto, mediano plazo que hemos visto nos parecen muy acertadas y hasta cierto punto realizables, ¿no? Ya empezaremos a ver conforme pues se normalice la actividad fronteriza en los próximos meses, cómo se van aplicando estas nuevas estrategias.
Muchísimas gracias, Elia, por tus comentarios. ¿Alguien más del lado mexicano que le gustaría comentar? Nada más, si quieren, nada más lo que pueden hacer es darle clic a la manita que tiene en la parte de abajo. Anyone else? Does anybody else have any comment on Don's presentation or in this section or on the other two sections on innovative strategies?
And Jose, I think we're going to ask for feedback by email if folks haven't had a chance to chime in here. And do you recall when did you wish to have the feedback by? Did we say by next week this time or?
Yeah, so yes, I know that we have shown a lot of information today with this presentation. There's how many innovative strategies? I think there were like over 30, 40 different strategies that, and so these strategies are spelled out and better in your technical and the technical memo that is part of your agenda package. If we will appreciate your comments and on the agenda package on this technical memo, and if you can provide your comments by the end of next week, by Friday, September 18, 2020, we'll appreciate them. Thank you. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so that's pretty much what I said. If you can, we will appreciate if you can provide your comments on these innovative strategies by next Friday, and your feedback. This presentation, this information, and your feedback is going to be presented at our next joint meeting with the Policy Advisory Committee and the Technical Working Group meeting on October the 20th. Well, thank you, team. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Don and Juan and Debbie. Next slide, please. Our next item In our next item, Zach Hernandez from Santac Service Bureau will review task number 4 of our scope of work, which calls for compiling and summarizing various data sets for updating the border master plan, including 2040 projections for cross-border travel demand. I want to remind you that at our February 27, 2020 meeting, this committee established an ad hoc task force to forecast northbound pedestrian, privately owned vehicle, commercial vehicle, bus, and rail crossings to 2040. This is item number 5 in your agenda package. After discussion, the technical working group will be asked to accept the forecasted border crossing data for use in the port of entry profiles and in evaluating port of entry projects. Zach?
Thank you, Jose. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yeah, we can hear you well.
Okay, thanks. As Jose mentioned, with this item, we're basically going to walk through some of the border crossing volume forecasts that we developed to, in a sense, set some benchmarks for the BMP. And as this group knows, our horizon year for the BMP is 2040. So we had to do some projections, some estimates for border crossing volume so that we could have something to inform not just the final report, but also what we'll talk about later is the criteria ranking for POE projects. And we'll get into that in high level detail in a little bit, but that's essentially what this item is covering. And you have a little bit more detail and a little bit more background in your agenda packet under item number 5. There's a technical memo as well as an attachment that has the data itself, and then a little bit of a description of how we came up with those numbers. So next slide, please. So just as a quick refresher, here's a couple of the data points that we agreed to at our first TWG meeting. We kind of all agreed that these data sets should be collected at kind of a minimum to inform the BMP. And we talked about the process that we would use to go out and collect that data. And you see in this table, in the blue and the green, we have what we call our border region profile data sets, which are essentially some socioeconomic and land use information, just kind of lay of the land sort of information, sort of data sets. And then in the orange right there, you see POE capacity and configuration. And that gets at the facilities themselves, the number of lanes and the types of lanes that exist at each POE. Next slide, please. And this grouping of data sets, that's where we get into the cross-border travel demand data, which is what we're talking about with this agenda item. So again, this includes our base year 2015, as well as information that we were trying to get for 2040. And that includes the crossings, the volumes themselves at the annual level for pedestrians, POVs, buses, trains or rail cars, and commercial vehicles. You see those grouped up there. And if you notice, these are marked as POE criteria data there in the second to last column to the right. So that's important to know because we'll be talking about how we needed to go out and estimate this information so that we have something to plug into that criteria ranking function that'll help us understand how POE projects get grouped and ranked. Next slide, please. As I was kind of trying to describe, here's a quick example of the 2014 BMP, the groupings of criteria data that were used as basically variables to help inform the ranking of POE projects. And when it comes to cross-border travel demand, it was basically traffic or the number of crossings that helped inform that specific criteria. And you see numbers 12 through 15 are just some of several different criteria, different factors that went into that calculation. But today we're going to be looking at the numbers that we developed as part of this BMP to plug into this new ranking. Next slide, please. So if you all remember at our February 27 meeting, the TWG approved the creation of an ad hoc task force, which was basically tasked to discuss and develop border crossing volume forecasts by mode, and also to discuss border wait time information and possible alternative sources. And Cheryl Mason will be discussing that in the next item. And the task force itself was had participation from CBP, SCT, SAT Aduanas, Indabin, Caltrans, ICTC, SIDUR, SCAG, and SANDAG. Next slide, please. So in between basically the March and April timeframe, we met, I think, a total of 3 times, and sprinkled throughout that there was some smaller huddles of staff to just bounce ideas back and forth, talk about methodology, potential reference data to use to come up with these estimates. But today what we're going to show are basically what we came up with for 2040 volumes of pedestrians, personal vehicles, commercial vehicles, buses, and trains. And a couple of really helpful notes off here to the side to just kind of keep in mind and add context to the next couple slides. This information, or these data points, are just northbound volumes only. They're annual totals as well, and these are calculated by mode. And as I mentioned, we're forecasting out to 2040, and our base year 2015 comes from the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, or the US federal government. And these are, just to kind of put into context, these are very sketch level or planning level estimates. And these are not intended to be used in necessarily environmental documents. I guess in summary, I would say that the BMP is more of a guidance document, and the purpose is to help summarize a lot of this coordination and develop some consensus around big priorities. And it's not, you know, a traffic and revenue investment grade level analysis. So just to manage some expectations up front, that's some of the context that I wanted to include. Next slide. So with that said, we did try as much as possible to rely on some of the existing information that's out there, some of the analysis that has been done to date, some recent analysis, luckily, and some of the documents that you see up here listed in the bullets are just some of the things that we referenced for help. And I guess what I'll say up front is that for personal vehicles and commercial vehicles, those 2 modes were the ones that benefited the most from recent analysis that was done, and projections that were done specifically for the SR11 Tier 2 traffic and revenue analysis were really helpful in putting together the estimates for POVs and commercial vehicles. And for the others, what we did basically was relied on looking at the historical data, putting our heads together and making some high-level assumptions where needed. And if you need more information on the methodology and the steps we took, you can find that in the agenda packet. Next slide. So let's take a look at the forecasts themselves. The first one here, we have pedestrians. And you see the tabular data to the left and the same information charted on the right here, side by side, 2015, and then forecasted out to 2040. And for pedestrians, border-wide, this represents, our estimation basically represents 57% increase over the 25-year period. And most of the growth we're expecting to occur at San Ysidro, as today it processes the most pedestrians already. Next slide, please. For personal vehicles, or POVs, the overall growth is expected to be closer to 68% over the 2015 year figure. With the majority of the crossings still occurring at San Ysidro, we expect it to be processing the most amount of personal vehicles again. And here, just to point out, we see first the Otay Mesa East first appearing in our list of POVs, which is expected to process 8.65 million POVs in 2040. And just as an aside, that's assuming a 5 by 5 POV configuration for that POV. Next slide, please. For commercial vehicles, a bit stronger growth we notice here. As I mentioned in a couple slides previous, we relied on the Tier 2 traffic and revenue analysis to kind of be our best bet at getting a good growth rate to apply to commercial vehicles in this case. So the 2.89% average annual growth rate assumed comes from that document, and that's applied to the other POVs as well. And it's also similar to the 2016 Phase 2 goods movement border crossing study done by SCAG, which assumed a 2.9% growth assumption. So you see, we're projecting out to 3.3, almost 3. Next slide, please. So for buses, this is kind of a unique case because this particular mode has shown a lot of decrease historically over the years. So we had to do a little bit more careful analysis with this one, but basically we're expecting it to decrease by 62% overall in the year 2040. And you see that asterisk there for the total in 2015. That's including crossings that were recorded for Tecate, but as of 2017, that facility is no longer processing buses. So just to keep that in mind. And that is our estimate for buses. Next slide, please. For rail cars, lastly, these, although they're reported through BTS occurring at Otay Mesa and Calexico East, they're occurring at San Ysidro and Calexico West. And overall, we're expecting it to increase by 31% into the year 2040. Next slide, please. So I'll pause here just briefly before I pass it back to Jose to prompt the TWG to take action or approve these estimates. But if anyone has questions, I can pause here.
Thank you, Zach. Do any of you have questions or comments for Zach? Remember, to ask a question, just raise your hand. I'll be calling on you by name. Okay, let's see. There's okay, Anthony.
Hey, Zach. A couple of things. First, a comment. I just want to thank you for the work that the modelers at Sandag do. You know, we use your forecast extensively in preparing some of our planning documentation, and so we really appreciate the effort that y'all put into it. I had a question. There are a number of transit improvements that are happening, particularly in San Diego County, but also Imperial Valley, around the ports of entry. Did you put any thought, or did you include any growth in pedestrian flows based on those transit improvements that are currently occurring?
So I could say that future facilities weren't necessarily taken into account. This process that the ad hoc task force kind of embarked on was a little bit more high level, and that's why I mentioned earlier that these are pretty sketch level, only meant to kind of give us a benchmark and some numbers to plug into our criteria ranking that Cheryl will kind of elaborate on a bit. But yeah, future facilities for transit that may indicate, you know, a mode shift to pedestrian weren't taken into account necessarily.
Okay, I would just follow up with that. You know, I think that as we're kind of thinking 20 years out about some of our ports of entry, it's going to be really important to think about what mode shifting looks like and how we're going to align transit and border facilities. And you know, I know that in a lot of ways there's a focus historically on POV traffic and commercial vehicle traffic at the ports of entry as far as the forecasting model. I think that we all need to kind of focus on the pedestrian and non-motorized populations, because I think that's where a lot of us are thinking our growth is going to happen, particularly as our POV lanes become further impacted and you know, crossing times increase. But thanks for all the work you guys do.
Thank you. Mario.
I just wanted to compliment, you know, what Zach presented and kind of what Anthony was bringing up. I think one item that we're doing in the region is the corridor mobility plans. And they are looking at broad corridors and multimodal effects, and we definitely agree with you, Anthony, that, you know, the mode shift is occurring and we're wrapping up big vehicle projects, and we should be focused on other types of modes of transportation in the near future. In Sandak with their big 5 moves, and Mark Baza also with some efforts in Imperial are doing that as the regional planning entities. So I think we're moving there. I don't know if this master plan will capture all of the results of those ongoing studies, but definitely something that the teams are tracking. And if we don't pick up 100% of it in this master plan, it'll probably be incorporated in the subsequent ones. But we're in the same frequency as you are.
Yeah, and I also would like to add is that the mode shift is one of our objectives, one of our goals for the border master plan. That's one of the things that we're trying to achieve. Thank you. Thank you, Mario. Anybody else? Mario, can you lower your hand? Anybody else has a comment or question for Zach? Okay. I don't see any other question. Well, with that, I will call for a vote of the technical working group representatives to accept the forecasted border crossing data for use in the port of entry profiles and port of entry criteria ranking. Please, can we unmute everybody so we can hear their vote?
Everybody has
Thank you.
permission to speak.
Okay. It looks like it's taken a little bit. So I'm going to be calling on all of you to vote. So everyone who agrees to accept this forecasted data, please say yes or sí.
Yes.
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 Sí.
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 Remember to unmute yourself, please.
And maybe,
Okay.
Jose, if we can offer, you
Everyone,
can also put up a hand as well if you agree.
yeah, thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Everyone opposing this motion, please say no. Okay, so with that, the technical working group accepts the forecasted border crossing data for use in the port of entry profiles and the port of entry criteria ranking. Thank you, and thank you, Zach. Next item, please. And the next item of our agenda, Cheryl Mason from Sandak Service Bureau will present another item under task 4 of our scope of work. This element calls for the development of average peak period border wait times. In coordination with the ad hoc task force, Sandak Service Bureau developed these estimates. The technical working group members will be asked to accept the relative position of peak period wait times for use in POE criteria, use them in border wait time for grouping transportation infrastructure projects, and to use it in port of entry profiles. This is agenda item number 6 in your agenda package. Cheryl, please.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Jose. We can go to the next slide. Okay, just as Zach was focused on the cross-border volumes as criteria for ranking the port of entry projects, this item focuses on another criterion that is used in the ranking of port of entry projects, and that's border wait times. It's estimates of wait times, which the Border Master Plan uses to measure POE congestion. It is also going to be used to group the transportation projects, and it's going to be used in the POE profile. So this illustration that you're seeing here is something similar to Zach used, that just zooms on the 3 criteria that were used in the 2014 Border Master Plan. And this is where we're looking at relative wait times. And we'll go through this process, and this is typically something that worked last time, just because as we start looking at a lot of averages with the border wait times from the CBP website, they just tend to feel low and not in line with some observed values. So we're trying to kind of present the information in a way that might make readers and users of the Border Master Plan more comfortable. So go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this was also something that the ad hoc task force was asked to do, to identify the source and discuss border wait times information. And so the task force members are listed there as well, same groups that were listed on the PowerPoint that Zach shared with you all. So next slide. So as part of the data gathering exercise, which is task 4, CBP did provide some average wait times by port of entry. And we talked about that at our initial ad hoc task force meetings, and really kind of based on some of the experience of the folks in the ad hoc task force on using wait times, they really encouraged us to use peak period border wait times instead of average wait times. And again, the average just seems to have that low feel to them. Even peak period average has kind of a low feel than observed time, but we wanted to at least start with that to see how those numbers might turn out for us. The source that was recommended is using the CBP data, because it's available for all of the ports of entry. We're able to access the data, and it's been widely accepted in many studies, so we're using that. We did talk with CBP to see if they might be able to produce peak period wait times for us, but really in the end, they really didn't quite have the resources to do that, so we looked to SANDAG for assistance. And Service Bureau and Caltrans and CDURT worked closely with SANDAG to work through a methodology to identify the peak periods and produce the estimates, which is what we'll share with you today. We met with a little bit of a subgroup a couple of times. We met with the ad hoc task force a couple of times to provide some input and provide comments as we worked through the process. So next slide, please. So I want to just walk through the methodology with you a little bit, just to give you a flavor of what we were, our steps in the process. This process was reviewed and vetted with some senior modeling and analytics staff at SANDAG, principal and modelers at SANDAG. All of the process and the data programming and the scripts we were used, everything was QA'd. So folks at SANDAG felt comfortable with this process before we had vetted it with the ad hoc group. Now, 2015 is the target year. That's the base year for our study. And we thought initially we'd be able to just use the data for 2015. I'm not sure how many of you know, I think most of you do, but SANDAG actually goes through and scans the publicly available data from the CBP website, where they post average wait times by hour. And we go through and SANDAG, the agency, goes through and scans those data and pulls them down and stores them in a database for future use, like we're using for today. The data for 2015 turned out to be incomplete, though. There was some missing data for some of the ports of entry, so we were right off the bat not able to use it. So we looked at the number of records that were available for 2016 and 2017. We actually even looked at 2018. We're really trying to stay kind of close to the 2015 timeframe. We settled on 2017, and some of the records are shown on the slide in front of you. It looks like a complete data set with a good number of records for each port of entry. What you see there is each port of entry, and see the number of records. So it's the average number of records by hour for each of these ports of entry, the pedestrian and the privately owned vehicles, and then the commercial. So we felt that was a good data set to move forward on. So next slide. So here's kind of our process and how we identified the peak period and then the calculation. So using the 2007 data, we included records for the weekday only, so we did not include Saturday, Sunday, and we include the standard lane, so just the regular lane, not the Century lanes or anything like that. We pretty much accepted all the records where a lane was open, but the data were not null or missing. So we've got a good amount of records in there. The data for each port of entry and crossing type, so passenger vehicle, pedestrian, commercial, was first trimmed to the hours of operation that was provided by CBP. We actually do have some wait times that are pulled down from the site for hours outside the operation, but we just trimmed it down to the official hours. And then we calculated the average delay by hour, and we removed some outliers. And then to find the peak period, our process was to sort the data by lowest wait time to highest wait time, and then calculate using a proportion of the delay. We've got the threshold is given at an 80% quantile. So this means that 80% of the delay lies below the threshold, and any hours that are not within this threshold are deemed to be the peak hours. So to demonstrate this, we've got an example up there for the Otay Mesa, Mesa de Otay commercial. And you can see on the left-hand side are the hours. And on the middle column there is the average delay in minutes by hour. And you can see how they're sorted by the shortest delay to the longest delay. And then what we do is we calculate this cumulative percentage of total delay. And we just keep accumulating until we get up to the 100%. And in the green area there that has the circle on it now, you can see where that is our peak period. You can see where the percentage is greater than 80%. So we would determine the peak period to be from 4 to 6 p.m., hours 16, 17, 18, and the average delay 45 minutes. And the average is just simply averaging those three values. So let me show you the results on the next slide we came up with for each of these. Actually, maybe we better go back. Is there any questions on the methodology before we move forward? This is a good place to pause.
I see a question from Mikael.
Okay.
Cheryl, just the semantics here. As far as delay, is that the wait times really?
Yes, Mikhail, that is the wait time.
Yeah, is there any way just for CBP, obviously, we don't want to be delaying anyone. We just have to deliver and do what we are paid to do, which is, to conduct inspections. So yes. Delay may be a bad word for us. Is there any way to rephrase that just for the benefit of, the group and everyone else, making sure that everyone understands that this is just a wait time, not really a delay? Just it may be derogatory in a way, because again, we're not in a business of delaying people. We just need to do what we have to do.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. Yes, will do. That's easy. Thank you. Are there any comments here that we can answer before we move on and look at how this turned out for each of the ports? Okay, let's move on because we'll have additional time to talk about that. So this table shows the average peak period wait time. And you'll see it's a privately owned vehicles, the pedestrian, and then the commercial. The next to the port name is the peak hour that's identified through the process. And then the average wait time for those peak hours. And as the task force, had mentioned, BMP agencies have mentioned this in the past. Sometimes these wait times themselves may not reflect the observed hours. So there's always been a little bit of sensitivity around the actual published values. So in the 2014 Border Master Plan, the Border Master Plan agencies approved and presenting the data in terms of the relative wait time at the port of entry rather than actually just using the values in some of the publications. It amounts to the same thing. It's just a matter of how it's presented, right? So let's see if, click one more time if you will for me, Erica. Okay, so this is how we will do it. It's really just looking at, for each type of border crossing, the longest wait time is going to be identified and it's set to 100%. The other wait times are calculated as a percentage of the longest time. So for instance, if we look at that privately owned vehicles, the longest wait time is 70 minutes. The second longest wait time is 61 minutes. So we set the longest at 100%, and the second longest wait time would be 87%. And that's just calculating 61 divided by 70 equals 87%. So that's how we do it for all of these, so that we can see that relative wait time. And it allows the BMP agencies, the public who use the report, to focus kind of on that relative position of the wait times, rather than really sort of focusing on the actual number that 61 seems too low, and we have a debate about that. It's a way that we can move forward. So that's something we want you to consider as we talk about this item. Another way to visualize this is with bar charts, a little bit easier. So if we go to the next slide, we can look at that. And these are what were shared with you in your technical memo. So you can see here the
Cheryl.
Yes.
Sorry, we have a question from Mario.
Well, it's more a statement, you know. I think that the statement is you're basically grading on the curve, right? And assuming that all the information that's posted is somewhat in a level playing field, regardless of the accuracy or not. So you're basically, you know, saying that the one that seems to have more time is this one, and that therefore that's the highest of the curve, and then you basically are doing that, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, correct. And that would show here for like this particular graph, it shows that the highest wait time is with the Calexico West Mexicali at 100%. And then everything is in relative position to that 100% value. With some, you know, San Isidro being very close, and then coming all the way down to where like Tecate and Andrade are just, you know, well, Andrade in particular, slightly more than half of the wait time of Calexico West. If we go to the next slide and look at pedestrians, very similar here. Again, the two port of entries are the two highest wait times, again, Calexico West and then San Isidro. And this one is actually kind of a, you can see 2, 2, and 2, really. We've got the two highest ports of entry, about 50%, a little less than 50% of the highest wait time stands Andrade and Otay Mesa. And then shorter wait times for Tecate, and really free flowing for pedestrians at Calexico East Mexicali Dos. And the last one is the commercial. If you go to the next slide for me, Erica, thank you. The highest wait time is Otay Mesa, Mesa de Otay. And then much smaller, a third of the wait time is occurring for Tecate and for Calexico East. The next slide shows all three of these together on one slide. And so maybe we can just kind of look at those and pause here, and working with Jose, see if there's any questions that we can answer for you.
Yeah, so we would like to hear, like, get your gut reaction. Based on your experience, are these like the Calexico West and the San Isidro Port of Entry are the ones who have the largest or longest border wait times for pedestrians and passenger vehicles? And same with Otay Mesa, Mesa Otay 1, because they have the longest wait times for commercial trucks. Or any question? Do you have any question for Cheryl on the methodology, on the approach? Just a reminder, this information is going to be used as we evaluate and rank port of entry transportation. So it's very important to hear your feedback. Remember, you can raise your hand or type your, okay, Enrique.
Okay, this is Enrique speaking. I just want to, so if I see this correctly, this is Calexico has more of a POV relative wait times. Is that contingent upon the number of vehicles, like the volume? Is the volume on one heavier than the other one, or?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
I thought San Isidro had the highest volume compared to Calexico West.
yes.
And so that, I don't know how that looks a little bit offset because of that.
No, yeah, this is totally independent of volumes. This
Okay.
is border wait time.
Okay.
Cheryl, I don't know if you want to add anything else.
We looked at,
We cannot hear.
yeah, this is independent of the volumes that occur at each port of entry. This is just strictly looking at the wait times.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Enrique. Anybody else have any question, comments? Okay. Well, thank you, Cheryl. With that, I will call for a vote of the technical working group representatives to accept the relative position of peak period wait times for use in port of entry criteria, use border wait times for grouping transportation infrastructure projects, and to use it in the port of entry profiles. So we're going to be using this data set, 2017 data. Can I ask our production team to unmute everybody? Or please unmute yourself.
So everyone has the ability to unmute themselves.
Yeah, please unmute yourself so we can vote. I see a lot of people muted.
Jose, can I ask a quick question again? This is Mikhail. Just because we're using 17
Yeah, definitely.
For San Isidro, right? When it was under construction, obviously didn't have all the lanes, etc. Are we going to compensate a little bit for, the added lanes that have been installed there after the 2017 data was, became available? I'm just not sure. I just want to make sure, because in comparison to Otay Mesa and everyone else, you would think that San Isidro would be the busiest port in terms of processing different types of coming in. Maybe I'm wrong, and I know we have FO in the call.
And one of the things that, and actually on the previous two port of master plan, and Cheryl, you know better this than I do. San Isidro was ranked as the port of entry with the highest border wait times for both passenger vehicles and also for pedestrians. And one of the things that we thought why things might change for the 2020 border master plan was there's been some modernizations and expansion of the San Isidro port of entry that might and Calexico West was still going on through a lot of these expansion projects, so maybe that those border delays are related to that. Anything else, Cheryl, do you want to add?
No, that's good, and it's still, these are really a snapshot in time, so it's not like we're it's really just looking at closest we can get to the base year so that we can use it for the criteria, and then and in some of the descriptive information, but we just have to come up with just one particular year because we know things will continue to change in 18, 19, 20.
Yeah, and that makes sense, Cheryl. As long as we all keep in mind that the port is not the same as what it used to be in 2017, I think we're fine. Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so can everybody unmute themselves so we can, I'll be asking for a vote. Thank you. So again, I call for a vote of the technical working group representatives to accept the relative position of peak period wait times for use in port of entry criteria, use border wait times for grouping transportation infrastructure projects, and to use it in port of entry profiles. So everyone that agrees, please say yes or C.
Yes.
Yes.
Sí.
Yes.
Yes.
Sí.
Sí. Yes. Sí.
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 Everyone that opposes this motion, please say no. With that, the technical working group accepts the relative position of peak period wait times for use in POE criteria, use border wait times for grouping transportation and infrastructure projects, and to use it in the port of entry project profile. Thank you, Cheryl. Next slide, please. In the next item, Cheryl Mason will review task 6 of our scope of work. This task calls for the technical working group members, agencies to submit port of entry and related transportation projects. Service Bureau will discuss the timeline and present an overview of the data requirements. This is an information item for all of you. This is agenda item number 7 in your agenda package. Cheryl.
Oh, good. Thank you. Okay. The reason we're bringing this to you now and to try to give you this overview on the kind of data we're going to need is really goes back to that schedule that we shared with you at the beginning of the session, that this is a new data entry tool we're working on. We've got consultants working on that piece now. That task is going to be, the time to complete that task is going to really be truncated. So we're trying to kind of give a little bit of a heads up, a little advanced planning, ask for your help on this one, and to get you to start maybe thinking about the kinds of projects that you might be submitting and what kind of data that you might need for that, so you could maybe be pulling some of that together and thinking about what the staff is that you might be able to help you with that, and also to think about coordinating with one another. Last year, Caltrans did a lot of the highway projects, and Sandag focused on transit projects and active transportation projects, and the same thing for Imperial County. So there was ways of coordinating. There was ways of coordinating with GSA was entering the project data, and CBP was not. They were reviewing. Same thing with INDAVIN and SCT and Aduana. So there's just, think about some ways of maybe coordinating too, so that we're not all entering the same projects, and it'll save us a little bit of time. So with that said, let's just look at this overview. So again, just to kind of give you a little heads up on what we're going to be needing. So if we go to the next slide. Okay, so as approved by the Policy Advisory Committee at their June meeting, we are going to be ranking the POE projects following the same criteria that we used in the 2014. Okay, so that's good. The transportation projects are going to be filtered to reflect a priority order. Remember back in our May meeting, we had talked with you about just grouping the projects, and you came back and said, you know, hey, we need some way for this to be sorted in a way that reflects some priorities for the transportation projects. And please take something to the policy group and vet it with them, and let's move forward on that, and which is something that we did. And the Policy Advisory Committee agreed on 3 criteria that would be satisfactory for grouping the transportation projects. And it's 1, by POE congestion, and that's the border wait times again. So those ports of entry that have high border wait times, that would make sort of our first tier, our first cutoff. And then underneath there, it would be on the project readiness, those projects that are ready versus those projects are in conceptual planning. And then it would be the POE connection, and that's really about projects that have a terminus at a port of entry versus projects that do not. So those would be the 3 criteria that we'll use. All of the projects are submitted have to be within that focus area. If you recall, that's 10 miles north and 10 miles south of the border. That area in gray on the image in the slide there. And then these projects need to be included in a planning document. One of the project types is a little bit more fluid with that, or a little bit more flexible, but these are projects that are on the books somewhere, basically. And the idea is they're projects that have already been vetted with the community, vetted with boards, vetted with jurisdictions, so they've been studied. So that's why the requirement to include them in some kind of a planning document. So next slide, please. Our projects are going to be grouped into POE projects and transportation projects. The POE projects, we'll rank these separately. So all the projects that have any kind of modernization, enhancement of an existing port of entry will be ranked against each other, and new ports of entry will be ranked against each other. And last time we had was the Otay Mesa East, but you know, we'll see if there's new ideas that would be presented in this border master plan update. The transportation projects have 5 groupings: the roadway, interchange, rail or transit projects, pedestrian, bicycle, and we've added micromobility in case there's more projects as we start thinking about scooters and mopeds and other forms of non-vehicle types of facilities. And then we've also included the short-term operational and minor capital projects specifically to reduce wait times at the border. So some kind of operational improvements. And those are the ones that might be ideas, they might be in a planning document, or they might be studied somehow, but it's like they're just sort of these short-term operational ideas, and it's a way to include them in the border master plan. So those are our 3 areas. And those are our 5 areas for the transportation. And I'm just going to generally go over some of the requirements. We've got a detailed list in that technical memo, and that started around page 65, I think, of the technical memo in the agenda package. But I'm just going to generally describe them. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the support that we'll be providing also to the technical working groups to work through this task. So let's go to the port of entry projects on the next slide. So really, this says, we'll be using this new online tool, and we'll be asking you for a lot of descriptive information. You know, where the project's located, what are the existing conditions, what is the conditions after the project completion. And we'll be asking things like, you know, the year of completion, asking you about the project costs. Do you have all the funding secured? How much funding is still needed? The phase of the project in terms of if the project is in a conceptual planning stage, so it's some sort of feasibility study, or if it's actually something that's a little bit more in an advanced planning stage, or if it's a presidential permit type stage. So it's just kind of a drop-down sort of question for that. And then there's also these more qualitative responses on does the project bring short, let's see what we call low, medium, or high environmental benefits, community benefits, and economic benefits. And then we'll ask the same sort of kinds of questions on positive impacts to other modes. So does this particular project that you might be submitting, would it actually have a positive impact on another mode? So if it were a bicycle lane, would that positively improve a standard vehicle lane if we could get people out of their vehicles and onto the bicycles? So there are some things that might be mentioned in some planning documents, but there really is more of a qualitative feel to these questions. The next one on the next slide is on the roadway or interchange projects. These are very similar, so I've grouped them together. Same kind of descriptive information, but then we'll also be asking for average daily traffic for the base year 2015 and then 2040 as well. The accident rate is just is it above or below the average for that facility? And then kind of a truck ADT share, percent share, to give an idea if this is really something that is also used for cargo or if it's really mainly for passenger vehicles. We'll ask about multimodal access. Does the facility also include some accommodation for bicycles or HOV lanes or things like that? And then also, you know, when the project becomes operational, so it's when is it open to traffic? Same sort of things, project costs, funding, the phase of the project, the terminus connection, and the POE primarily served. They're in bold because, again, those are the 3 items that we'll be using to sort and filter all the project data to put the projects in some kind of a priority order. Very similar question, the last piece on qualitative feel and based on information in certain documents on the high, medium, or low environmental, community, and economic benefits that the project could bring. And let's go to the next slide. Rail projects. Again, you'll start seeing very similar kinds of things here. A couple of things I would point out would be grade separation projects could be in here as well. So that might be included if you were actually, the project were a grade separation project. And then instead of asking ADT for these projects, we'd be asking about the number of passengers if it's a transit type of project, or the number of rail cars if it's a freight project. Next slide, please. This is the PED bicycle and micromobility projects. This has never been ranked through our border master plan. So there's a lot of descriptive information, year becomes operational, project costs, and then the three elements in bold there so that we could filter those projects into some kind of a prioritized list. The last one there, the next slide, is the short-term operational minor capital improvements. Asking about, the connection, to the port of entry doesn't really make sense here in terms of if it's a terminus facility or not. So these projects would just be filtered based on the phase of the project and then the POE primarily served. And then we'll measure the congestion on that. So let's go to the next, and I'm happy to, go through any of these questions which you might have with this list. And just to finish up with a couple of slides, the online data portal development, a couple of images here from the service that we used last time. It's going to be a little more streamlined, using more current technology. There'll still be a project information piece. There's still going to be a mapping component piece. So we still need you, when you put your project in, to give us the limits of that project so we know how to map that project. But the feel to it should be a little more intuitive, and we're hoping that you like some of the changes that will be available to you. One thing we are going to do that we hope will be helpful is that we are going to preload all of the projects that you submitted in the 2014 Border Master Plan, and you'll have the opportunity to mark the project as complete. Maybe you're going to need to update it with that. Maybe it wasn't actually complete in 2017, it was complete in 2018. You can update it, mark it as complete. Maybe something has changed a little bit in the scope. You can edit it and put in some new due dates. And then you can, of course, enter all kinds of new projects as well. So that hopefully is going to help you folks with a streamlined process and move through that process fairly quickly and not too painfully. Next slide. What we're hoping to do to help you with this is, one, we're going to provide some training on October 20th. Again, that's a combined meeting, a joint meeting of the Policy Advisory Committee and the Technical Working Group. So that first part of the meeting, you'll all be together, and we're going to be concentrating on the innovative strategies and asking the PAC to approve those. The second half of the meeting is going to be really focusing on the Technical Working Group. And like I said earlier, probably some technicians. Some of you are going to have some help gathering this information, and maybe even they'll be the ones entering the information. So we'll show you how to do that with some demonstrations and some training. We have a user guide that we're preparing in English and in Spanish that will give some help on how to move around on the new data portal. And it also gives really some detailed descriptions of all the data fields so that there's, we're all understanding what's being asked in the same way. And again, we have the list of projects that were submitted in 2014 Border Master Plan, and I actually can send those out even earlier. So it's something, if you're interested, we can go ahead and just make arrangements to send those out to you so you can start thinking about what has been submitted and what the current status is and where are the new projects that need to be submitted. Next slide, please. This is our timeline. Again, October 20th is a key date for the training. October 21st through November 6th, that would be the time that the Technical Working Group would be key entering all the data and submitting the port of entry and the related transportation projects and the mapping. That's a heavy lift. We know that. That's only about not quite 2.5 weeks. So that's a heavy lift. Once we get all the data by November 6th, we have a heavy lift ourselves where we will have a couple of weeks to pull it all together, rank the port of entry projects, group the transportation projects, pull it all together under each port of entry so we have a picture of each port of entry. That has to be internally vetted with Caltrans and CDURT before we put that in an email out to you folks so that you're ready to discuss it at our December 8th meeting. Special meeting of just the Technical Working Group so that we can vet the rankings and get your feedback. And we're probably going to ask you to do a little kind of reviewing, maybe briefing your Policy Advisory Committee folks as well, because we'll be asking the Policy Advisory folks to approve the rankings at the February 11th meeting. And if I recall, that might be our last slide. Let's go one more. Yes, this is happy to answer any questions that we can turn this action slide back over to Jose.
Thank you, Cheryl. Do we have any questions on this item for Cheryl? Remember, you can just raise your hand or type your question on the chat box. And as a reminder, this item is kind of like the meat of the border master plan. So it's very, very important that you should start talking with your internally within your agency and with other agencies on what projects you want to nominate to be included and rank in the border master plan. And as Cheryl said, we're going to be asking for a lot of information, and so it's good. So we're going to be having a lot of fun with all of this. And then we have to put it some way. I know it's going to be a lot of work, but anybody has any questions or comments on? So for this action item, like Cheryl was mentioning, we're asking you to think ahead about the projects that you would likely submit and prepare, and start preparing the data that will be required. You can see the type of information that we're going to be requesting in this PowerPoint and that Cheryl just presented, and also it's included in your technical memo. And also, we're asking you to start coordinating among yourselves. And yeah, we'll be discussing this more heavily on our December 8th meeting with, so yeah, so, and on December the 8th, if I recall, no, I'm sorry. At the end of this process, this list is going to be approved by the policy advisory committee, or the project list on our February meeting. Anybody else? Any questions or comments? Okay. Well, thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Next item. Thank you. In our final agenda, Robin Owen from Caltrans will summarize our meeting agreements. Robin, can you read today's meeting agreement? Next slide, please.
Hi, this is Robin. And I'll try to share my screen if you can hear me okay.
Okay.
Just make sure I'm doing that right. So hopefully you can see that on your screen. If not, I'm going to go ahead and read it anyway. So summary of agreements. The technical working group today approved the agreements from the May 26, 2020 technical working group meeting. Second agreement was that by September 18, 2020, next Friday, the technical working group agreed to provide comments and feedback about the proposed innovative border improvement strategies, task 7, as well as priority groupings for these strategies. Please send these remarks to Caltrans, CDORT, and Sandag Service Bureau. Third, the technical working group accepted the forecasted border crossing data for use in developing the port of entry profiles and for ranking of POE project criteria. Fourth, the technical working group accepted the relative position of peak period border wait times from 2017 for use in ranking POE projects, grouping transportation infrastructure projects, and in developing POE profiles. Fifth, the technical working group agreed to consider in advance and prepare information about projects that the Border Master Plan member agencies are likely to submit by compiling the data that will be required, coordinating with other technical working group members regarding the proposed projects, and discussing with your Policy Advisory Committee representative after the December 8, 2020 Technical Working Group meeting. The Technical Working Group, well, I should pause here and make sure that there are no further comments or questions about these agreements.
Thank you, Robin. Is there any comment or question? And can everybody mute themselves, please? So remember, if you want to ask you have a question or comment, just raise your hand or type it in the chat box. Please unmute yourself so we can approve the meeting agreement. Okay. Everyone that agrees with the meeting agreements, please say yes or sí.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
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 Everyone that opposes this motion, please say no. With that, our meeting agreements are approved. Thank you, Robin. I just want to remind everybody that our next technical working group and PAC joint meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, October the 20th. And it's also going to be a Zoom webinar. And the next just technical working group meeting is scheduled for December the 8th. So mark your calendars. It's also going to be scheduled from 11 to 2. And as well as going to be a Zoom webinar. With that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you and stay safe.